Hi, I'm Tony Saldana. Welcome to our video series on professional GBS. In this session, we're going to talk about GBS client management. Now, this is the fourth video in our service management module. And as a reminder, we recommend that you go through these 4 sessions within service management in sequence. And also, please cover the foundation module before attempting any other module. Now, within this clip, we want to talk a little more about what client management is. Why is it important? If you're doing a great job delivering services and you've got your global process owners and your overall corporate folks that are happy, why do you have to go through this extra step of having account managers or client managers that are embedded in various business units and functions? We will also talk about specific examples of methodologies that have proved to be best in class for GBS organizations around client management. And finally, we'll share a few practical tips on how to systemically execute GBS client management. Now let's start with the question, how do you stay relevant to the business? Recall in the past we've talked about the importance of staying relevant. You do not want your GBS organization to become a commodity. If you become a commodity, that goes down the path of irrelevance, of essentially competing with external service providers who may be able to deliver lower cost and other services that do not deliver the same type of value creation that GBS could provide to the business. Now, if you want to drive the model of running as a business, it might be instructive to follow the same approach that other businesses, specifically in the change leadership and consulting industry, use to become relevant to their clients. If you take the example of an Accenture or a Deloitte, they typically would organize themselves on 3 vectors. One is the industry vertical or the product organization. So in the case of consultancies, this might be the financial services or manufacturing services or consumer packaged goods services. The equivalent of this in GBS is your service line. So HR shared services or, order to cash or procure to pay or any of those service categories. The second vector of organizing is delivery. Now, the consulting organizations might have geographic delivery centers or capability centers or offshore centers, and that might be true within your GBS organization as well. You might have either insourced or outsourced delivery centers. But it is the third vector, which is organizing against your clients, that is usually missing in less mature GBS organizations. Consulting organizations might have client teams that embed themselves within their large customer base. They want to understand what is happening with the customer so that they can proactively, understand where the business is headed and how they can constantly create value to their clients. And that's basically what client management is about. This is how mature GBS organizations can stay relevant by embedding themselves within their client organizations and constantly striving to stay relevant and to deliver new types of value creation to their businesses. Now, this question of business relevance may seem a little odd. After all, you've done your service strategy. You've basically said, hey, tell me, business leader, what you need. Tell me, users, what you need. And what you've done is you've constructed a strategy to deliver exactly that, right? So then one might ask, why do I have to worry about being relevant to the business? After all, I am delivering exactly what they have asked me to do. Well, here's the dilemma in either a product or a service business. By asking people what they want, you are not likely to get 100% of the story. This kind of goes back to the old saying that Ford used to have. If you'd asked the customer what they want, they would have told you, I want a faster horse carriage. And that is certainly true in our world as well. What people think they want may not be exactly what they need because perhaps they don't really understand the possibilities, what you as a mature GBS leader could bring to their business. And there is therefore going to be this gap between, what you deliver, which arguably is what they asked for, and what they really, really need. The intersection of what people think they want versus what they need is where business relevance lies. By constantly going back and showing possibilities and getting feedback and then redesigning your capabilities on the fly, you will stay relevant to the business. So as you, the GBS leader, stay relevant by embedding yourself into the client organization, the question might come on, what are you supposed to do? How do you stay relevant? How do you interact with the client? What is the role of a GBS client manager? The way to describe this is to kind of get into the two tension points that exist within your clients. Again, keep in mind that we're talking about clients, not users. Your users could be everybody in the company or maybe a subset of them that use your GBS services. On the other hand, the client is the senior executive, perhaps it's the president or the leader of the business unit that in some shape or form is paying for the GBS services. And therefore, they have the right to determine what services they want you to deliver for their organizations. And therein lies tension point number one. What the client says they want, which could be cost reduction, may be at odds with what their own employees desire. Maybe the employees want gold-plated services, and the client is maybe not really willing to pay for that. It is your job as the client manager to have that conversation. You want your client manager to put the choices in front of the paying client so that the client can be your ally in driving change within the organization. That is one important role that the client manager plays. The second role that the client manager plays is to actually bring together the various services, the functional services within GBS, so that the client really does not have to worry about dealing with finance separately from IT, which is different from sales or operations or manufacturing, and so on and so forth. In reality, if your client is a business unit leader, they really should not have to deal with these functional silos. Business processes typically cut end to end. Order to cash goes from sales to operations or supply chain into finance. These cut across financial and sales and manufacturing silos. So the GBS client manager is a person that represents business operations in total. They bring together whatever it takes for the client to deliver their business results by leveraging the operations of the organization. It is these two tension points that are at the center of staying relevant to the business unit and functional clients. I want to reemphasize a few points. Best-in-class GBS organizations absolutely need to have a strong client management practice. This is no different than any other product or change management business who wants to stay very close to their clients. And given the fact that in the GBS industry, there is a big difference between the needs of the clients, who are the payers, and the needs of the users, who are the consumers, it is really important to stay close to both. Client management drives decisions to create value for the company that is very much aligned with the needs of the payers. Now, the reason that's important is that the biggest challenge that GBS organizations can run into is the issue of perceptions. Maybe the GBS organization's doing a fabulous job of delivering, let's take an example, payroll. But perhaps somebody that's very vocal in the organization, perhaps the admin assistant to a senior business leader, has had a payroll issue. For all you know, that particular example of a misstep might set up the entire perception of the senior leader about GBS. It's really important for GBS leaders to be in those conversations, to provide data. Perhaps this was one issue out of 100,000, and it was very much in keeping with the service levels. But how do you essentially shape perceptions? How do you shape the equity and the image of the GBS organization? That is an important role of the GBS client manager. The other opportunity is to be proactive by embedding yourself with the business leadership team. What you are doing is you are becoming a business leader. You understand the challenges and the opportunities in the business, perhaps to expand the business, perhaps to, do something related to acquisitions or divestitures. And there is a role that GBS can play to drive additional value in those strategies. Putting all of these together, GBS client management has therefore become one of the very important design elements for mature GBS organizations. Now let's talk a little more about why these mature organizations have client management. One, which is obvious, is that we're trying to drive relevance, and we've talked a little bit about that. But how exactly do you go about driving relevance? If you kind of think about it, users may have a whole bunch of wants, but clients can help you translate those wants into needs. The way GBS client management works is that by becoming a conduit for the clients, the senior executives, to share their perspectives, the client managers can then translate these into service requirements. Ideally, mature organizations have dedicated client managers who are different than service managers. So you may have service managers for payroll or accounts payables or for supply chain management, and you may have client managers for, for example, the Western European business region or for a particular product category within the company. The client managers are taking the requirements from the business units and really helping the GBS service managers bring them to life through their services. The mechanism by which this is done is by annual joint business plans. You create a literal document for every client that says, for your business to thrive and to create value, these are the promises, these are the capabilities that GBS is going to bring to the party. So we've talked about how annual processes like the joint business plan, which is done once a year with every client, can bring to life the work of the GBS client manager. Now, there is a methodology behind that too, and that's called the client management framework. What the client management framework is going to do is to help the GBS organization define which clients do we want to engage and how frequently, and what do we want to engage around. Is this going to be around service levels? Is this going to be around cost? Is this going to be around innovation? And who within the client organization gets to determine many of those choices? The best way to bring the relationship between clients and GBS to life is through a few artifacts. The first one that we recommend is a longer-term capability roadmap. This is something that's tied to the business leader strategy. Maybe, they're in a period of expansion internationally, or perhaps they want to build their supply chain capabilities. And these are going to require projects that are not short term. So by deliberately creating a capability roadmap that's dedicated to that particular business unit's goal, you establish a strategic relationship that goes beyond the tactical day-to-day delivery of transactions. Another good way to really get close to the business is to map out the key stakeholders within the client organization. We all know that most senior leaders do have, influencers that work with them that shape the equity and the image of other supplier organizations. It is really important for GBS to understand who these influencers are. So, for instance, the president of a global organization may have regional leaders that really are much closer to the type of work GBS does and are therefore able to shape the image and the equity of GBS back to the president. Having such a relationship map professionalizes the way you talk with your clients. And finally, and most importantly, is the annual plan, which I've talked about earlier, which is the joint business plan. This particular process has been adopted from the retail industry. Most retail companies have an annual process with each of their vendors that determine how those vendors are going to do more than just supply products. They talk about innovation. They talk about joint initiatives that are going to be done by the vendor and the retailer. They talk about cost goals and efficiency goals and many other strategic objectives like sustainability. The equivalent in the GBS world is to create such a joint business plan. We will get into what that looks like in just a second, but suffice to say that this is the documentation of the commitments, of the promises of GBS specific to every client organization. The joint business plan, at a very, very simple level, outlines before the start of the fiscal year what are the financial commitments, what are the operational commitments, as well as what are the innovation commitments from GBS. GBS as a whole, not just individual functions like finance shared services or HR shared services, but GBS as a whole towards that specific client. Let's take each of those three in particular. Finance. These could be goals such as savings. Perhaps the business unit is having a really, really rough year and they need extra savings from GBS. That's got to be documented. That's got to be documented not just because this is GBS's responsibility to cut costs, but maybe there are some consumption-related reductions that the business unit needs to make. For example, in the area of facilities management, perhaps there is a choice that the business needs to make around releasing one of their facilities so that they can save that expense in workplace services and facilities. So those are the kind of commitments that need to be documented because it requires two-way action between GBS and the business unit to deliver against those financial goals. The second type of commitment that's documented is operational excellence. These are the service level agreements. It could be that perhaps this is an average of all of the services, whether it's finance or HR or others, and each of those have different commitments, 99.99% reliability or, payment on time and so on and so forth. But it could also equally be addressing narrow specific outages. Perhaps, the payroll service has been less than reliable and needs to be addressed. And the business unit leader has a concern about that service from GBS. This is the opportunity to very transparently document the commitment to get that service back on track. And then the third part of the joint business plan template is the initiatives or innovations that are committed by GBS. These would not be the generic corporate initiatives, but these would be typically things that are very relevant, specific to that particular client. As mentioned earlier, maybe that particular business unit has some strategy that is unique, perhaps an acquisition or an expansion or something specific in which they need GBS capability help. This would be the opportunity to document those project capabilities, their deliverables, and their success measures. Once you document this joint business plan at the start of the year, you want to be deliberate about tracking progress. Typically, this is done either on a quarterly basis or, depending on the granularity required, more often. At the end of the day, the joint business plan is not just intended to hold GBS accountable, but to cement the partnership. A partnership requires both parties to come together and agree on common goals and to help each other be successful. By driving transparency on GBS commitments, you are cementing the relationship and setting yourself up for success within that business unit. When executed well, the GBS client management framework delivers tremendous value, not just in shaping the image and the equity of GBS, but by increasing the relevance of the GBS work. There are many value creation ideas and innovations that GBS can bring to every business unit. By working with the business unit to drive better choices, to create a portfolio of offerings that's tailored to them, you can deliver higher value to the business. It is really important for GBS not just to work at a corporate level to deliver average services that are excellent across business units. It's really important to connect the dots between the needs and the capabilities within the GBS organization for every specific client. There are also challenges. In the services business, we know it's just inevitable that one service or the other is going to have an issue at some point in time. By putting together this communications mechanism and relationship, you can partner with the client organization in minimizing the impact of these outages. And at the end of the day, once you do that, the image of GBS as a professional organization and the recognition and the ability for GBS to continue to move up the value chain only gets better and stronger over time. So as we wrap up on the client management segment here, I want to reemphasize a few things. One is that professional GBS organizations will have dedicated resources on client management, because staying embedded and staying in touch with individual clients is the key to continuing to be relevant to the business. It is really important to get embedded into client leadership team. Client management is not about offering single point of contact. If you have any question, please come to me. No, that's not client management. Client management is the proactive practice of going in and embedding yourself, becoming a member of the leadership team for the business, and helping shape and drive business strategy. And then finally, the document and the process that is proven to do this is the annual joint business planning process. This concludes the fourth clip on the service management module. The first three described in detail the role of the service manager and how they go about creating their catalogs and their strategies and bringing them to life. The fourth section was all about client management. Client management and service management work together because what they do is that they bring to life running GBS as a business. We hope you've enjoyed this session in our Professional GBS series. And as always, all the best as you professionalize, modernize, and transform.